Hey there. Welcome back to Bedtime Books. Get comfortable, settle in. Tonight, we're going somewhere dark and cold and absolutely fascinating. And listen, if you fall asleep halfway through, that's not a problem. That's the whole point. No quiz at the end, I promise. Just a story. Sometimes you carry something you wish you could undo. A choice, a consequence. Something you set in motion that took on a life of its own. If that sounds familiar tonight, this story gets it. It's been asking that same question for over 200 years. Let's listen together. Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley in 1818. And no, it's not what you think. It's stranger, sadder, and far more beautiful than any movie version. The story begins not in a laboratory, but on a ship. An English explorer named Robert Walton is sailing toward the North Pole, chasing glory. Then one night, the crew spots something impossible. A figure moving across the ice, enormous, fast. And then hours later, another figure, this one barely alive. They pull him aboard. His name is Victor Frankenstein. And once he can speak again, he begins to tell Captain Walton the most extraordinary story imaginable. It starts in Geneva, Switzerland. Victor grew up in one of those rare golden childhoods. A wealthy family, a beautiful home on the lake, and all the love in the world. There was Elizabeth, adopted into the family as a child. Blondie, gentle, adored by everyone. Victor's closest companion, and eventually, the woman he'd promised to marry. Even as a boy, Victor was drawn to the old forbidden texts, alchemists like Agrippa and Paracelsus. Books about turning lead into gold and conquering death itself. One night, a thunderstorm. Lightning strikes a tree outside the Frankenstein home. Victor watches it explode into splinters. The raw power of electricity, right there before his eyes. Then his mother died. Caroline Frankenstein, caring for Elizabeth through scarlet fever, caught the disease herself. She didn't survive. Victor was 17. The world cracked open. After the mourning, Victor left for university. Ingolstadt in Bavaria, far from Geneva. Far from everything safe and warm. He was about to become someone else entirely. At Ingolstadt, a professor named Waldman changed everything. He told Victor that modern chemistry had real power. That the old alchemist's dreams could actually be achieved through science. Victor threw himself into study. Chemistry, anatomy, physiology. He barely slept. He stopped writing home. Months disappeared into the haze of discovery and dissecting rooms. And then, somewhere in those sleepless months, a thought took hold of him that wouldn't let go. What if death wasn't permanent? What if he could reverse it? Before we follow Victor into that room, into the moment that changes everything, just a quick pause. A small moment between you and me, if that's all right. We tell stories like this every week. The great ones, told gently, perfect for sleep. If you're enjoying this, a subscribe and that little bell icon means you'll always find us. Thank you. Really. Now, back to Ingolstadt. Back to Victor Frankenstein's attic room, where something terrible and wonderful is about to happen. The night of creation. For months, Victor had been collecting materials in secret. Charnel houses, graveyards, slaughterhouses. Places most people can't even think about. He went there at night alone. Piece by piece, he assembled a body. An enormous body, 8 feet tall, because smaller parts were too difficult to work with. Imagine that detail. It's so human, so practical. He stopped eating properly. Stopped answering letters. Elizabeth wrote from Geneva asking why he'd gone silent. His father wrote with concern. Victor couldn't explain not this. Picture that attic room. Glass jars lining every shelf. Wires and galvanic batteries. The smell of chemicals. And in the center, on a long table, a shape under a sheet. A dreary night. Rain against the windows. Victor connects the final apparatus. His hands shake. One spark. That's all it will take. One spark to cross the line. The yellow eyes open. That's how Shelley describes it. The dull yellow eye of the creature opened. Victor has succeeded. And in that same instant, he is destroyed by what he sees. He runs. That's the thing people don't expect. Victor doesn't fight, doesn't try to destroy it. He just runs. Out of the room, down the stairs, into the rain-soaked streets. He wanders all night, reciting poetry to himself, shaking, unable to go back. When dawn comes, the reality hasn't changed. He made something alive, and then he abandoned it. Then, a miracle of timing. Henry Clerval arrives in Ingolstadt that very morning. Victor's oldest friend, cheerful and warm, completely unaware of what Victor has done. Victor drags Clerval back to the apartment, terrified of what they'll find. But the creature is gone. The room is empty. Relief washes over him, but where did it go? Victor collapsed. The moment Clerval arrived, Victor's body gave out completely. Nervous fever, the doctors called it. Months of delirium, shaking, screaming in his sleep about things no one understood. Clerval stayed by his side through all of it, nursing him, reading to him, writing cheerful letters home so the family wouldn't worry. That was Henry, always the good one. When Victor finally recovered, he did something remarkable. He pretended none of it had happened. The laboratory, the creature, the yellow eyes. He pushed it all underground and smiled. Letters came from Geneva. Elizabeth wrote about the family, about little William growing tall and golden-haired, about how much they missed Victor, normal life continuing without him. Victor tried to become a student again. He attended lectures, took walks with Clerval, avoided anything to do with anatomy. But some doors, once open, don't close just because you look away. Now here's where the story splits. Because while Victor was pretending everything was fine, the creature was out there. Alone. Newborn in every way that mattered. Stumbling into a world that hated him on sight. Imagine being born fully grown, with no language, no understanding. Light hurts, cold hurts. Hunger is a mystery. Every sensation is brand new and overwhelming and unexplained. The first time he approached humans, they screamed, threw stones, slammed doors, children ran, women fainted. He hadn't done a single thing wrong. He just looked the way Victor made him. He fled into the wilderness. And eventually, starving and cold, he found a small cottage at the edge of a forest. He didn't go inside. He found a lean to shed attached to the back wall. Through that crack, he watched a family. Felix, a young man. Agatha, his sister. And their father, de Lacy, an old blind man who played the violin. They were poor, but they had each other. Day after day, the creature watched them. He learned what a smile meant, what tears meant. He saw Felix give his portion of food to his father and go hungry himself. He learned kindness by watching it. And then he started helping. Secretly. At night, while the family slept, the creature would gather firewood and leave it stacked by their door. They never knew who their mysterious benefactor was. Language came next. Listening through the wall, the creature started to connect sounds with meanings. Father, bread, fire, happy, sad. Each word a tiny bridge to the human world. Then a young woman named Safi arrived at the cottage. She was Turkish, learning French. And because Felix taught her from books, the creature learned alongside her. Grammar, history, the whole world opening up. Books changed everything. The creature found 3 Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives, and the Sorrows of Young Werther. He read them over and over, and they broke his heart wide open. Paradise Lost hit hardest. Milton's story of God creating Adam, and then Satan's fall from grace. The creature saw himself in both. Was he Adam, made and then abandoned? Or was he Satan, cast out and cursed? Then he found something worse. In the pocket of the coat he'd taken from Victor's apartment, there was a journal. Victor's journal. Every detail of the creature's own construction, written in disgust. He wasn't born. He was assembled, from pieces of the dead. And the man who made him called him hideous, monstrous, a wretch. His own creator couldn't stand to look at him. Can you feel that? But he didn't give up. Not yet. He made a plan. The blind father, de Lacy, couldn't see his face. If the creature could speak to him first, win his sympathy with words alone, the others might accept him. He waited for a day when Felix and Agatha were out. Then he knocked. De Lacy answered, welcomed him in, offered a seat by the fire, and they talked. Beautifully. The old man listened without judgment. Then Felix came home. He saw the creature crouched beside his blind father and didn't hear eloquence. He saw a monster. He grabbed a stick and beat the creature until he fled. That was the turning point, the one chance. The only time anyone had treated the creature as a person, and it lasted maybe 10 minutes. Everything that happens after grows from this moment of rejection. Rage replaced hope. The creature waited until the family fled their cottage in terror. Then he set it on fire, watched it burn against the night sky. His education in hatred was complete. He had one destination now. Geneva, the name in Victor's journal. The creature would find his creator and demand answers. Why was he made? Why was he abandoned? What was he supposed to be? Spring warmed the roads as the creature traveled. He moved at night mostly, hiding from people during the day, sleeping in caves and abandoned barns, always heading south towards Switzerland. Near Geneva, he came upon a river. A young girl had fallen in, drowning, thrashing. Without thinking, the creature dove in and pulled her to shore. He saved her life. His instinct was still to help. A man appeared. The girl's father, presumably. He saw the creature holding his daughter and drew a pistol. The shot hit the creature in the shoulder. That was his reward for saving a child's life. Every kindness punished. Every gesture misread. The world had taught him one lesson consistently: your face is your verdict. And there is no appeal. Something inside him hardened after that gunshot. In the woods near Geneva, the creature encountered a boy. Small, golden-haired, running through the trees. Maybe a child would be different, the creature thought. Children haven't learned hatred yet. The boy screamed, called him a monster, an ogre, and then said the worst possible thing. My father is Monsieur Frankenstein. He will punish you. That name, Frankenstein, the creature's maker. This was his child. Something snapped. Months of rejection, the gunshot, the beatings, the loneliness. The creature seized the boy by the throat. When it was over, William Frankenstein lay dead in the grass, the first kill. Around the boy's neck was a locket, a miniature portrait of a beautiful woman. The creature took it and crept to a nearby barn, where a young woman was sleeping. He placed the locket in her pocket. Justine. Back in Ingolstadt, Victor received a letter from his father. William was dead, murdered. The family was shattered. Victor needed to come home immediately. The words barely made sense. Victor rushed to Geneva. And on the road, during a thunderstorm, a flash of lightning illuminated the landscape. There, on a nearby ridge, stood the creature. Victor knew instantly. He knew who killed William. In that lightning flash, everything connected. The creature was in Geneva. William was dead. Victor had created the thing that murdered his own brother. And he could tell no one. Who would believe such a story? But the authorities had already found their suspect. Justine Moritz, the family's servant, the sweet, quiet girl who'd grown up with them. They found Caroline's locket in her pocket. The evidence was damning. The trial was swift and merciless. Victor sat in the gallery, watching Justine plead her innocence. He knew she was telling the truth. He knew exactly who placed that locket, and he said nothing. Think about that silence. To tell the truth, he'd have to confess everything. The laboratory, the creature, the 2 years of lies. He'd be declared insane, and Justine would still hang, so he told himself. Under pressure from the court and the church, Justine confessed. Not because she was guilty, but because she was broken. A false confession, extracted from exhaustion and fear. She was sentenced to death. Justine was executed. Victor now carried 3 deaths: William, killed by his creation, Justine condemned by his silence, and his mother, whose death set this whole catastrophe in motion. The weight was crushing. Elizabeth, always gentle, always trusting, said something that struck deep. If Justine could be convicted on such evidence, then no one is safe. Justice itself is a lie. Even Elizabeth's faith was cracking. Victor fell apart quietly. He drank. He wandered the estate grounds at night. He couldn't sleep without nightmares. The family whispered about him. Something had broken inside him, and everyone could see it except no one knew why. Alphonse tried. Victor's father, growing older now, gray and stooped with grief himself, gently urged his son to rejoin the living. to take a trip, to see the mountains, to remember there was beauty in the world. So Victor went to the Alps, Chamonix, the valley of the Arve. He climbed toward Mont Blanc, hoping the sheer scale of the mountains might shrink his guilt into something manageable. The sublime as medicine. And there on the glacier, crossing the ice with impossible speed, a figure appeared. Enormous. Moving straight toward him. The creature had found Victor, and this time he wanted to talk. Face to face on the Mer de Glace, Victor screaming curses. The creature standing still, absorbing every insult, waiting patiently for his creator to run out of rage. Then he spoke. Victor called him devil murderer, vile insect. Threatened to tear him apart with his bare hands. The creature didn't flinch. He'd heard worse from strangers. From his creator it was almost expected. And then the creature began to speak. And this is what people don't expect from the movies. Shelley's creature is eloquent, philosophical, heartbreakingly articulate. He sounds like Milton, not a monster. I was benevolent and good, the creature told him. Misery made me a fiend. 9 words that contain the entire argument of the novel. He wasn't born a monster, the world built one. The creature asked Victor to sit, to listen, to hear the full story from the other side. Reluctantly, bitterly, Victor agreed. They found shelter in a cave above the glacier. And the creature talked for hours. We've already heard what the creature endured. The confusion, the rejection, the delacies, the books. But hearing it from his own mouth, in his own careful words, changes everything, even for Victor. The creature described his first days in the forest with tenderness that surprised Victor. Learning what fire was. Discovering that berries could be eaten. Watching the moon cross the sky and not knowing what it meant. He told Victor about the pool. How one morning he bent to drink and saw his own face for the first time. Shelley writes that moment with devastating simplicity. He looked, and he understood why people ran. The de Lacy chapters poured out of him. How he'd watched this poor family with adoration. Learned to feel joy when they laughed, pain when they wept. He loved them. They were everything he wished he could be part of. Through Safi's lessons and the 3 books he found, the creature assembled an extraordinary mind. He could debate philosophy, understand history, feel poetry in his bones. His intellect was Victor's one true gift to him. But knowledge brought agony too. Now he understood exactly what he lacked. He had no species, no parents who chose him, no name anyone had given with love. He was the only one of his kind in the entire world. When he described the de Lacy rejection, the beating, the screams, the door slamming, his voice shook. Victor, sitting in that cold cave, could hear the wounds still open. Months later, it hadn't healed. It never would. He described the long walk to Geneva, the rage building, but underneath it, a desperate ember of hope. Maybe his creator would be different. Maybe Victor would look at him and see something more than a mistake. The drowning girl. He told Victor about pulling her from the river, about the bullet that followed. Victor said nothing to that. What could he say? His creation saved a life and was shot for it. Then William. The creature's account of meeting the boy in the woods. How he'd hoped a child might see past the surface. How quickly that hope was destroyed by a single terrified scream. The creature didn't excuse what he did to William. He described it plainly. The rage, the hands closing, the silence after. He told Victor it was monstrous. And then he said, "You made me capable of this." Framing Justine, the creature admitted, was calculated cruelty. He'd learned that from humans too. He watched how society scapegoated the vulnerable. He simply applied the lesson. Victor heard this and felt the ground shift beneath him. Then came the demand. The reason the creature had sought Victor out, had told his whole story, had laid bare his soul on this frozen mountain. He wanted a companion, a female creature like himself. "I am alone and miserable," the creature said. "Only someone equally hideous would not reject me." He wasn't asking for beauty or power. Just one companion who wouldn't scream at the sight of him. One person. Victor refused. Instantly. The horror of making another one. The thought of two such creatures in the world. He couldn't bear it. His first instinct was always no, always recoil, always run. The creature's response was a threat wrapped in a prophecy. "I will be with you on your wedding night." Those words would haunt Victor for the rest of his life. Though he misunderstood exactly what they meant, but the creature also made a promise: create a companion, and they would vanish. South America, the jungle, never seen by human eyes again. He swore it. A deal that could end everything, if Victor had the courage. Not out of compassion, out of fear. He shook no hand, made no warm promise. He simply calculated that building one more creature was better than losing everyone he loved. A terrible bargain, struck on ice. Victor descended the mountain a changed man, carrying a secret promise like a stone in his chest. He returned to Geneva, to his family, to Elizabeth, and said nothing about what he'd agreed to do. His father Alphonse, trying desperately to restore some happiness, suggested the obvious. Victor and Elizabeth should marry. It had been planned for years. Surely love could heal what grief had broken. Victor couldn't face the wedding, not yet. Not with the bargain hanging over him. He told his father he needed to travel first. England. For research, he said. The lies came easier now. The real reason was simple and terrible. He needed to build the female creature far from his family. Far from anyone he loved. An isolated workshop where he could do the unthinkable a second time. Henry Clerval joined him for the journey. Through London, then Oxford, then the English countryside. Clerval saw beauty everywhere. Castles, poetry, rolling green hills. Victor saw only the shadow of what waited ahead. Clerval talked about literature, about adventure, about the future. Every sentence was a reminder of the life Victor was destroying. His best friend's joy became almost unbearable to be near. In Scotland, Victor made his excuse. He needed solitude for his research. Clerval should tour the Highlands. They'd meet again in a few weeks. Victor headed for the most desolate place he could find. The Orkney Islands. The hut on the Orkney shore. Stone walls, a rough plank table, one window facing the endless sea. Victor set up his instruments. His second laboratory. Everything about it felt like a grave being dug. He began the work, assembling a female creature from materials he'd gathered along the journey. Every stitch disgusted him more than the first time. The novelty was gone. Only the horror remained. Doubts crept in as he worked. What if two creatures bred? What if they produced a race of beings like this? He could be unleashing something that would threaten every human on Earth. The responsibility was staggering. And what if the female creature refused the male? She hadn't agreed to this bargain. She might despise her companion. She might be even more violent than him. Victor had no way to guarantee anything. Then Victor looked up. And there, framed in the hut's single window, was a face. The creature, watching, grinning. He'd followed Victor across all of Europe. He'd been watching the progress with hungry anticipation. Something broke in Victor at that grin. In a frenzy, he tore the female creature apart. Ripped the stitches. Scattered the pieces. Destroyed months of work in minutes. The bargain was dead. The creature burst through the door, and the sound he made wasn't rage. It was anguish. A howl of grief so deep it barely sounded human. His one chance at companionship lay scattered on a dirty stone floor. "I will be with you on your wedding night." He said it again. The same words, but now they carried a different weight. Not a threat, a promise. A guarantee that Victor would know lost the way the creature did. The creature vanished into the storm. The Orkney darkness swallowed him whole. Victor stood alone in the ruined hut, surrounded by the evidence of two failures. The first creation and the second destruction. Victor had to dispose of the remains. He couldn't leave them to be found. So he loaded everything into a basket, weighted it with stones, rowed out to sea at midnight, and dropped it into the dark water. Exhausted, he fell asleep in the boat. When he woke, a storm had carried him far off course. The Orkney Islands were gone. He was adrift, and when the current finally pushed him to land, it was Ireland. The welcome was hostile. A body had been found on that beach just hours before. A young man strangled. And here was Victor, arriving by sea with no explanation. They arrested him on the spot. They took him to see the body, and Victor's legs gave out. Because lying on that table, neck purple with bruises, was Henry Clerval, his best friend. The creature had found him first. Victor broke completely. Fever took him again, worse than before. For months he lay in an Irish prison cell, delirious, screaming confessions that made no sense to anyone. They thought he was simply mad. Word reached Geneva. Alphonse, old now and barely holding together, traveled to Ireland to retrieve his son. The father, who had once dreamed of great things for Victor, found a shattered wreck in a prison cell. Victor was acquitted. Lack of evidence. He'd been at sea when Clerval was killed. The timeline didn't work for the prosecution. But acquittal meant nothing. Clerval was dead. Another name on Victor's invisible list. Father and son traveled home together. Through England, across the Channel, through France. Alphonse talking gently. Victor staring out the carriage window. Two men hollowed out by a grief neither could fully share. Elizabeth's letters arrived along the route. Loving, worried, patient. She asked Victor directly, "Do you love someone else? Is that why you seem so reluctant?" She was trying to understand his distance. She couldn't. Victor resolved to go through with the marriage. Maybe, he told himself, happiness was still possible. Maybe the creature's threat was aimed at him alone. He would face his wedding night armed and ready. He could protect her. "I will be with you on your wedding night." Those words. Victor assumed they meant the creature would come for him. Kill him. It never once crossed his mind that the target might be Elizabeth. That blindness would cost everything. The Frankenstein household tried to feel joy again. Wedding preparations filled the Geneva estate. Flowers ordered, guests invited. Elizabeth chose her gown. The family needed this. Victor let them have it. Victor moved through the preparations like a man rehearsing for two events at once. A wedding and a battle. He was certain the creature meant to kill him on the wedding night. Him, not anyone else. That was his blind spot. He armed himself carefully. 2 pistols. A hunting knife strapped to his belt beneath his wedding coat. He checked and rechecked the powder. If the creature came for him, Victor would be ready. He was certain of it. The wedding day arrived. Elizabeth was radiant. Genuinely, completely beautiful in a way that made everyone in the room catch their breath. Victor held her hands at the altar and tried to mean every word. Part of him did. Throughout the ceremony, Victor's eyes moved. To the chapel doors, to the windows, to the shadows behind the pillars. He was watching for a figure that wasn't there. Not yet. The creature was patient. He could wait. After the ceremony, the couple traveled by boat across the lake to a small inn on the opposite shore. Their wedding night destination. The water was calm. Elizabeth trailed her fingers in it and laughed. Victor watched the shoreline. Evening settled over the lake. Clouds gathered. Wind picked up across the water, making the lanterns on the inn's terrace sway and flicker. A storm was building. Of course it was. Storms always came at the worst moments in this story. Victor told Elizabeth to go to their room. He'd join her soon. Then he patrolled the inn. Every corridor, every unlocked door, every window facing the darkness. He was looking in every direction except the right one. Then a scream. From above. From the bedroom. Elizabeth's scream cutting through the storm like a blade. And in that one sound, Victor understood. He'd been wrong. The threat was never about him. He burst through the bedroom door. Elizabeth lay across the bed, her hair spread on the white sheets, her eyes open and seeing nothing. Dead. And there, framed in the open window, the creature stood watching. The creature pointed at Elizabeth's body, one long finger extended toward the bed. "Look," the gesture said. "Look at what I lost. Now you know how it feels." Then he disappeared through the window into the storm. Victor fired his pistol into the darkness. The shot cracked over the lake. He fired the second. Both missed, or hit nothing that mattered. The creature was already gone, swimming through the storm-churned water, vanishing completely. Victor gathered Elizabeth in his arms, held her against his chest, her skin already cooling. The white wedding gown stained with rain from the open window. He had done this, not with his hands, but with his ambition, years ago, in an attic room. The pattern was now undeniable. William, Justine, Clerval, Elizabeth. Everyone Victor loved was marked. The creature wasn't trying to kill Victor. He was doing something far worse. He was making Victor live with loss. When the news reached Geneva, Alphonse Frankenstein collapsed. His youngest son murdered. His ward executed. His son's best friend strangled. And now Elizabeth, the light of the household. It was more than the old man's heart could bear. Alphonse died within days. Grief, the doctors said. His heart simply stopped. Victor had now lost everyone. Mother, brother, friend, servant, wife, father. All of them gone. The golden childhood erased completely. Something shifted in Victor. The guilt hardened into rage. He went to the local magistrate and told the full truth. Everything. The laboratory, the creature, the murders, every detail, from the beginning. The magistrate listened politely, then told Victor there was nothing he could do. No evidence, no credible suspect. The story sounded like madness. Victor left the office knowing he was entirely alone in this. Justice would not come from outside. Victor made a vow, not to God, not to the law, to himself and to the dead. He would hunt the creature across the earth. However far, however long, he would find it and destroy it, or die trying. The pursuit began. Northward through Europe, following traces the creature left deliberately. A destroyed campsite here. A slaughtered animal there. Messages carved into tree bark. The creature wanted to be followed. The creature left food at intervals. Just enough to keep Victor alive and moving. A dead rabbit beside the trail. Berries gathered and placed on a rock. It was a taunt and a lifeline at once. The hunt was a game to him. This chase was deliberate. The creature wanted Victor to suffer the journey, not just the destination. Every cold night, every exhausting mile, every moment of isolation was punishment. The creature was teaching Victor what loneliness felt like. Through frozen Russia, Victor bartered for a dog sled and pushed into the Arctic. Past the last settlements, past the last trees. Into a white emptiness where nothing lived and nothing grew. Still northward. Always northward. The ice began to crack beneath the sled. Great fissures opening with sounds like thunder. The Arctic was breaking apart around him. Water appearing in widening leads between the floes. The pursuit was killing the pursuer. His body was failing. Frostbitten fingers. Snow blindness, ribs visible through his skin. But the rage kept him moving. When the sled broke through the ice and the dogs drowned, Victor continued on foot, crawling when he had to. And then, a ship. Walton's ship. We've come full circle now. The vessel frozen in the ice that Victor had been crawling toward. The beginning of the story was actually the end. Walton's rescue was Victor's final chapter. Aboard the ship, wrapped in blankets, Victor finished telling Walton everything. All of it. And his voice, when he reached the end, carried the weight of a man confessing not just to a listener, but to history. Victor's final request was simple. If he died before finding the creature, Walton must finish it. Promise me, he said. Destroy the thing I made. Don't let my story end with the monster still walking the earth. Walton, listening, began to see himself. He too had chased glory to the edge of the world. He too had risked other people's lives for his own ambition. Victor's story was a mirror, and Walton didn't like what he saw. The crew had had enough. The ice was closing around the ship. Men were getting sick. They demanded Walton turn back. Abandon the expedition. Go south. Go home. Go anywhere that wasn't this frozen coffin. Victor, hearing the argument from his sickbed, dragged himself on deck, and even dying, he urged them forward. Don't turn back, he said. Glory awaits. His obsession survived even his body's collapse. It was breathtaking and horrifying. Walton made the harder choice. The braver one, arguably. He ordered the ship to turn south. He gave up his dream. Where Victor never could stop reaching. Walton chose to pull back. It's the quietest act of heroism in the entire novel. Victor faded quickly after that. The fire that had kept him alive, hatred, guilt, obsessive purpose, guttered out once the ship turned south. His body had been waiting for permission to stop. Now it did. His last words were complicated. He warned Walton against ambition, but he also couldn't quite bring himself to say he was wrong to try. Even dying, Victor was split between regret and pride. He never fully chose one. Victor Frankenstein died aboard that ship, in the Arctic, surrounded by ice and strangers. The boy from Geneva, the genius of Ingolstadt, the groom of one terrible night, gone, his quest unfinished. His creature still alive somewhere in the white. That night, Walton heard sounds from the cabin, movement of voice. Not Victor's, something deeper, rougher, broken with grief. Walton took a lantern and opened the door, and found the creature inside, weeping over his creator's body. Picture this. The 8-foot creature, wrapped in animal furs, standing over the man who made him and abandoned him, touching Victor's cold face with surprising tenderness. The monster mourning its maker. It's one of the most powerful scenes in all of literature. Walton didn't run. He stood there and looked at the creature, and he saw what Victor never could. Not a monster, a person. Damaged, dangerous, guilty, but unmistakably a being capable of sorrow, of love, of loss. The creature spoke to Walton, and his words were remarkable. Measured, philosophical, self-aware. He knew exactly what he was and what he'd done. There was no justification, only explanation, and an unbearable sadness underneath everything. He told Walton he hated what he'd become, that the murders brought no real satisfaction. Each killing hollowed him further. He'd wanted love and received violence, given violence in return, and the cycle had consumed everything. He called himself the most wretched of all beings. An abortion, he said, something that should never have existed. The self-hatred was total. His creator's revulsion had become his own, internalized completely. He saw himself through Victor's eyes. Then the creature told Walton his plan. He would go north, to the very top of the world. And there on the ice, he would build a funeral pyre and burn himself. End what Victor began. Take responsibility where his creator never did. A funeral pyre on the ice. Think about that image. The creature who began with a spark of electricity, choosing to end in fire. The element he first loved in the forest, the element he used to burn the de Lacy cottage. Fire. Beginning and end. The creature climbed through the ship's porthole, dropped onto the ice, began walking north, into the darkness. Walton stood at the railing and watched him go. There was nothing to say, nothing left to do. Shelley's final image is unforgettable. The creature, carried away on an ice raft, into the Arctic darkness, growing smaller and smaller until he was lost in darkness and distance. We never learn if he burned. We never see the end. And that's where the story ends. Where it began. Ice, solitude, and the consequences of reaching too far. Walton turns his ship south. The creature drifts north. Victor lies cold between them. The circle closes. Now, let's talk about what just happened. Because Frankenstein isn't just a horror story. It's a philosophical argument disguised as one. And the central question is deceptively simple. Who is the real monster here? Victor created life. That's extraordinary. That's godlike. And then, in the very same hour, he ran away from what he'd made. He didn't try to teach it, name it, clothe it. He saw it was ugly and he fled. That abandonment is the novel's original sin. The creature asked for so little. Company, understanding, a name. Someone who would look at him without screaming. He asked for the bare minimum of what any living being needs, and was denied every single time. Every murder the creature committed was a mirror. William's death reflected Victor's murder of innocence. Justine's framing reflected society's injustice. Clerval's death destroyed Victor's capacity for friendship. Elizabeth's ended his capacity for love. Here's what haunts people about the wedding night. Victor assumed the creature would come for him. He armed himself. He patrolled. He never once thought to stay with Elizabeth. He left her alone in the room. His self-centeredness killed her. That's Victor in a single moment. Even when trying to protect someone, he's really protecting himself. His fear was always about his own death, his own exposure, his own guilt. Elizabeth existed at the edge of his attention, never at its center. Shelley did something extraordinary with the creature's voice. She gave the supposed monster the most beautiful, eloquent language in the entire book. Victor speaks with self-pity. Walton speaks with ambition. The creature speaks with poetry and precision. The novel asks a question that still doesn't have an answer. What do we owe the things we create? If you bring something into existence, a child, a technology, an idea, are you responsible for what it becomes? And what happens when we refuse that responsibility? Shelley's answer is clear. Everything falls apart, not just for the creator, but for everyone around them. The abandoned creation becomes the instrument of its own maker's destruction. Let's go deeper into the creature's mind, because Shelley did something radical for 1818. She made the monster the most sympathetic character in the book, born innocent, corrupted entirely by rejection and cruelty. Was the creature born evil, or was he made evil by a world that refused to see past his face? That question sits at the heart of Frankenstein, nature versus nurture, and Shelley lands firmly on the side of nurture. The world built this monster. Paradise Lost runs through the novel like a second spine. The creature read Milton and saw two possible versions of himself. Adam, the beloved creation. Satan, the cast-out rebel. Both made by a father figure, both defined by that relationship. Adam at least had a creator who stayed. God walked in the garden, spoke to Adam, gave him a companion, provided rules, a home, a purpose. Victor gave the creature nothing. Not a word, not a touch, not even a backward glance. Satan at least had companions in his fall, other rebellious angels. An army, someone to rage alongside. The creature had no one. Not even an enemy who acknowledged him as an equal. He was more alone than any character in any mythology. The De Lacy episode is the novel's moral test, not a test for the creature. He passed. He was patient, kind, eloquent, humble. It was humanity's test, and humanity failed. Felix saw a face and swung a stick. That was the verdict. Now here's a question that divides readers. The female creature. Was Victor right to destroy her? He had his reasons. Real ones. But were they good enough to justify breaking his promise and condemning the creature to eternal solitude? Victor's fear was genuine. Two creatures could multiply. A new species outside human control. The risk to humanity was real. If the female had children, Victor wouldn't just be a failed creator. He'd be the architect of humanity's displacement. But consider the other side. The creature asked for one companion. One. In exchange for vanishing from human civilization forever. Victor denied him that. Chose the theoretical safety of millions over the certain agony of one being he had personally wronged. And honestly, Victor's reasoning was selfish. He didn't destroy the female out of noble concern for humanity. He destroyed her because the creature's grin through the window disgusted and terrified him. It was revulsion, not ethics. Fear, not philosophy. Let's step back and look at the frame story. Walton's letters to his sister Margaret. They're not just a literary device. Walton is Victor's double. Another ambitious man pushing beyond safe limits, risking others' lives for personal glory. But Walton chose differently. When the moment came, when the crew begged to turn back, Walton listened. He valued their lives over his dream. He chose retreat. That single decision separates him from Victor entirely. Walton is us, the reader. He hears Victor's story and has to decide what to do with it. Do you keep pushing forward, chasing your own dangerous dream? Or do you hear the warning and turn around? Shelley leaves that choice with us. Notice the novel's structure. Letters from Walton contain Victor's confession, which contains the creature's story. 3 layers of narration, each filtered through someone else's memory. We're always at a distance from the truth. Why does this matter? Because we never hear Victor or the creature speak directly. Every word is filtered, remembered, possibly altered. Walton's sympathy for Victor shapes what he records. Victor's guilt shapes what he confesses. The truth is somewhere between all three voices. Whose version do we trust? Victor minimizes his cruelty, describes the creature with disgust even in moments of sympathy. The creature softens his violence, emphasizes his suffering. Both are unreliable narrators. Shelley trusts us to see between the lines. Shelley refuses to give us a simple moral. Victor is guilty, yes. But the creature murdered children. Society is cruel, yes. But does cruelty justify murder? There's no clean answer. And that's exactly what makes this novel last. Isolation runs through every layer of this story. Victor isolates himself in his laboratory voluntarily. He chooses obsession over connection. Every time someone reaches for him, Elizabeth, Clerval, his father, he pulls away. The creature's isolation is the opposite. He didn't choose it. His exile was forced on him by every human who saw his face and screamed. He tried desperately to connect and was denied every single time. His loneliness was a sentence, not a choice. Walton is isolated by ambition, sailing to the edge of the map, leaving his sister, his country, everything familiar. He's between Victor and the creature. His isolation is half chosen, half inevitable. He still has time to turn back. Elizabeth is isolated by gender, trapped in the Geneva estate, waiting, writing letters, having no power to act. She can't follow Victor. She can't investigate the murders. She can only wait and hope, and eventually die without ever understanding why. Every character in Frankenstein is alone. Connection fails over and over. Victor can't connect with his creation. The creature can't connect with humanity. Elizabeth can't reach Victor. Walton can't reach the pole. The novel is an anatomy of failed connection. Dangerous knowledge. That's another thread woven through every chapter. Victor's entire tragedy begins because he learned something he shouldn't have. The secret of life. Not because the knowledge was wrong, but because he wasn't ready for it. Victor crossed a line that nature never intended to be crossed. He reversed death. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. The creature couldn't be uncreated. The knowledge couldn't be unlearned. Some doors only open one way. The novel's full title tells you everything. Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans. His punishment was eternal, an eagle eating his liver every day, forever. Victor's punishment was the same kind, unending. Prometheus stole fire and suffered for it eternally. Victor stole the secret of life and suffered for it until his last breath. The parallel is deliberate. Shelley knew exactly what myth she was retelling, and she knew the ending before she started. But here's the difference. Prometheus gave fire to all of humanity. His theft was generous. Victor's act benefited no one. He didn't create life to help the world. He did it to prove he could. The modern Prometheus is actually a lesser one. The novel isn't against science. That's a common misreading. Shelley admired science. She was married to a man who worshipped it. What she warned against wasn't discovery itself, but irresponsible discovery. Creation without care. Responsibility. If you strip everything else away, that's what the novel is about. You create something. A child, a technology, an institution, and you are bound to care for it. That obligation doesn't expire because the result is ugly or inconvenient. The creature wanted a father. That's it. Underneath the eloquence and the philosophy and the rage, he wanted someone to claim him. Victor, look at me. Victor, teach me. Victor, tell me I have a right to exist. The simplest need in the world. What the creature learned from books is remarkable. Through Plutarch he understood heroism and civic virtue. Through Goethe he grasped the depths of human emotion. Through Milton he encountered creation, fall, and the agony of exile. His education was extraordinary. But the world outside those books taught him something else entirely. People screamed. People threw stones. A man shot him for saving a child. A family he loved beat him and fled. Every hand raised against him was a lesson in cruelty written on his body. Shelley asks the question plainly. Who made the monster? Was it the lightning in the laboratory? Or was it every slammed door, every stone, every scream? The electricity gave him life. People gave him his rage. The role of beauty and ugliness in this novel is devastating. The creature's soul was refined by books, music, and observation. His mind was sophisticated. His empathy was real. But none of it mattered because his face was wrong. Society's judgment based on appearance. Shelley wrote about it in 1818. And if you think that theme has aged, consider how the world still treats people who look different. The creature's experience is not as fictional as we might like to believe. Justine's story reinforces the point from a different angle. She was pretty, kind, innocent, and the system still destroyed her. A planted locket, a false confession under pressure, and she was dead. Beauty didn't save her either. Justice failed regardless. The legal system fails in Frankenstein just as personal relationships do. Justine is convicted on planted evidence. Victor is arrested in Ireland on coincidence. The magistrate dismisses Victor's truth as madness. Institutions are as blind as individuals. Women in Frankenstein deserve particular attention. Elizabeth, Justine, Caroline, Safie. Every woman in the novel is defined by men's actions. They wait, they suffer, they die. Not because they're weak, but because the world Shelley depicts gives them no power. Shelley's critique is subtle but unmistakable. The women are not weak characters. They're strong people trapped in weak positions. Victims not of personal failing but of a system where men pursue and women absorb the consequences. Elizabeth's letter asking Victor if he loves someone else is one of the most quietly heartbreaking moments in the book. She can see something is wrong. She's perceptive enough to name it. But she can't know the real answer. No one could imagine the real answer. Caroline's death is where everything begins. She caught scarlet fever while nursing Elizabeth. An act of pure love, pure selflessness, that led to her death, and her death planted the seed of Victor's obsession. Conquer death. Defeat the thing that took my mother. There's a cycle in this novel. Women sacrifice, men pursue, and destruction follows. Caroline sacrifices herself for Elizabeth. Victor pursues the secret of life. And the creature destroys Elizabeth. The chain connects directly through three women's fates. Even the creature defines himself through the desire for a partner. His demand for a female companion mirrors the novel's assumption that completion requires another person. Loneliness, in Shelley's world, is the one truly unbearable state. Nature in the novel is always more than scenery. The Alps are sublime, beautiful and terrifying at once. When Victor is in the mountains, he feels briefly restored. The sheer scale of nature makes his problems seem smaller, but the relief never lasts. When Victor is surrounded by nature's beauty, Lake Geneva, the Rhine, the English countryside, he feels temporarily healed. But the feeling always fades. Because nature can't cure what nature didn't cause. Victor's wound is human. Only human care could have healed it. Nature in this novel also serves as a contrast to Victor's unnatural act. Life is supposed to come from nature, from bodies, from unions, from the organic process. Victor bypassed all of that with wire and lightning. His creation was a violation of natural order. Weather in Frankenstein is never accidental. Storms accompany every pivotal moment. The night of creation, rain. William's murder, lightning. The wedding night, a storm over the lake. Shelley uses weather as emotional punctuation throughout. Lightning as a symbol. The same force that inspired teenage Victor when it shattered the tree outside his window. The same principle he harnessed to animate the creature. Electricity. The spark of life and the instrument of hubris. One element, two stories. Fire belongs to the creature. His first discovery in the forest. Warmth, light, cooking. Then his weapon, the De Lacy cottage burning. And his intended end, a funeral pyre on Arctic ice. Fire is his element. Comfort and destruction and purification all at once. All that fire, all that rage, all that passion, frozen. The Arctic swallows everything. The pursuit stops. The story stops. Victor's body grows cold. The creature walks north into a white silence. Entropy wins. The ending refuses closure. And that's deliberate. We don't see the creature die. We don't see the pyre, we don't see flame or ash. Shelley stops the camera before the final scene. He drifts away, and we are left with a question mark, not a period. Lost in darkness and distance. That's the last image. 5 words that have haunted readers for over 2 centuries. Not dead, not alive. Just lost. Somewhere out there. Maybe still walking, maybe consumed by fire. We'll never know. Did the creature really burn himself? Shelley lets us wonder. Maybe he did. Maybe he built the pyre, climbed on, and ended what Victor began. Or maybe he walked on. Maybe he's still walking. The open ending is the novel's final gift. That open ending is an invitation. The story lives precisely because it never fully resolves. It asks you to carry the questions forward. To decide for yourself who the monster was, who deserved forgiveness, and what responsibility means. And that's what makes Frankenstein eternal. It never stops asking. 200 years later, the questions are sharper than ever. It's a novel that grows more relevant with every generation. Which is exactly what Mary Shelley intended. Now let's step away from the story and talk about who wrote it. Because the life of the author is almost as extraordinary as the novel. And in some ways, just as haunted. Mary Shelley, born Mary Godwin in 1797 in London, and from her very first breath, she was surrounded by extraordinary minds and terrible loss. The two would define her entire life. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft. If you haven't heard the name, she was one of the earliest champions of women's rights, a radical thinker who argued that women deserved education and independence. She died 11 days after giving birth to Mary. Mary's father was William Godwin, a philosopher, a political radical, brilliant, respected, but emotionally distant. He raised Mary in a house full of books and ideas, but warmth and affection were harder to come by. Imagine growing up in that household. Your dead mother was a famous writer. Your father entertained the greatest minds of the age. Books were everywhere. Ideas crackled through every conversation. But the person you needed most was a ghost. At 16, Mary met Percy Bysshe Shelley. He was a poet, young, brilliant, radical, already married to someone else. He came to visit her father, and instead fell in love with the philosopher's daughter. The attraction was instant and mutual, and wildly inappropriate. They eloped. Scandal erupted. Mary's father, who had written books defending free love, was furious when his daughter practiced it. Percy left his pregnant wife. They fled to Europe with Mary's stepsister Claire, carrying almost no money and enormous dreams. Mary's first child, a baby girl, was born prematurely in February 1815. The baby wasn't named. She died within days. Mary was 17 years old, unmarried, exiled from her family, and grieving a child she barely had time to hold. Loss became Mary's constant companion. Before she was 20, she would lose that first child, then endure her half-sister's suicide, then lose another infant son. Death circled her life like weather, and it found its way into everything she wrote. The summer of 1816, the most famous literary gathering in history, Lake Geneva, Switzerland. Mary, Percy, Lord Byron, Byron's Dr. Polidori, and Claire Claremont, all together in a villa by the lake, and the weather was terrible. The most famous poet alive, charismatic, scandalous, brilliant. Percy Shelley, already a celebrated radical poet himself. And Mary, 18 years old, the youngest mind in the room, but perhaps the sharpest. What a gathering. That summer's weather was genuinely apocalyptic. Mount Tambora in Indonesia had erupted the year before, filling the atmosphere with ash. 1816 became the year without a summer. In June it felt like November. Snow fell in places that hadn't seen it in centuries. Trapped indoors by the endless rain, Byron proposed a challenge. Each of them would write a ghost story. The best one wins. It was a parlor game, nothing more. Byron dashed off something forgettable. Percy started and stopped. Polidori began what would become the first vampire novel, and Mary sat thinking. Days passed. Everyone else had written something. Mary had nothing. The pressure built. She wanted desperately to produce something worthy of the company she was keeping. But every idea felt wrong. Too small. Too conventional. She waited for something she couldn't name. Then the nightmare came. Mary woke from a terrifying dream. She saw a pale student kneeling beside a thing he had assembled. A hideous phantasm of a man, stretched out, showing signs of life. The student running away in horror. The creation pursuing. She woke terrified. And then she realized something incredible. The nightmare was the story. She didn't need to invent a horror tale. One had come to her in her sleep, complete with the image that would launch the novel. She began writing the next day. What started as a short ghost story grew. Mary kept writing after the Geneva summer ended. The tale expanded into a full novel. Characters deepened. The creature gained his voice, his philosophy, his heartbreak. The story wanted to be bigger than a parlor game. Mary Shelley encouraged her, edited drafts, and wrote the novel's preface. Scholars still debate how much of the final text is Mary's alone and how much Percy contributed. The consensus now is clear: the vision, the characters, the moral architecture, all Mary. Percy polished the prose. Frankenstein was published on January 3, 1818. Anonymously, no author name on the cover. Mary was 20 years old. The dedication was to William Godwin, her father, and Percy wrote the preface. Most readers assumed a man had written it. Reviewers assumed Mary Shelley had written it. Some credited Byron. The idea that a woman, a young one at that, could produce something this dark and philosophically complex simply didn't occur to most literary critics of the time. When Mary was eventually revealed as the author, the reaction was shock. A young woman wrote this brutal, philosophical, morally complex horror novel. The surprise itself tells you everything about what the world expected of women in 1818. The scientific context matters too. In the late 1700s, Luigi Galvani had discovered that electrical current made dead frogs' legs twitch. Galvanism, they called it. The idea that electricity might be the secret of life was taken seriously by real scientists. Giovanni Aldini Galvani's nephew went further. He applied electricity to human corpses. In 1803, he electrified the body of an executed murderer in London. The jaw clenched. An eye opened. The audience gasped. Some fainted. The boundary between life and death seemed to blur. Percy and Byron discussed all of this at Geneva that summer. Erasmus Darwin's experiments with spontaneous generation. The possibility that life could be artificially created. Mary listened absorbed and filed it all away. When the nightmare came, it had material to work with. Mary took the science, the philosophy, the grief, and the ghost story challenge, and she alloyed them together into something entirely new. Frankenstein wasn't just horror. It wasn't just philosophy. It was something the world hadn't seen before. And she was 18. Beyond the personal story, the world was changing rapidly around Mary. The Industrial Revolution was transforming England. Machines were replacing human labor. Factories darkened the sky. The anxiety that technology might outrun humanity's ability to control it was everywhere. The Romantic movement was the artistic response. Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Keats. All rejecting cold rationalism in favor of emotion, nature, and the sublime. Mary Shelley was at the center of it. And Mary channeled both sides. She loved science, and she feared what it could become. Frankenstein sits exactly at the border between Enlightenment and Romanticism. It admires Victor's intellect while condemning his arrogance. It celebrates the creature's emotional depth while acknowledging his violence. The novel holds both worldviews and finds them both insufficient alone. Mary's personal losses are woven into every chapter. The death of mothers runs through Frankenstein like an underground river. Caroline dies. The creature has no mother. Elizabeth becomes a mother figure who is also destroyed. Creation and death are permanently linked. Mary knew what it meant to create life and lose it. Her first baby died in her arms. When she wrote about Victor creating a being, and then failing to care for it, she wasn't writing abstract philosophy. She was writing from the deepest part of her experience. Mary revised the novel significantly in 1831. The new edition added more religious language, more fatalism. Victor became less responsible and more destined. Scholars debate which version is the real Frankenstein, the raw 1818 original or the more polished 1831 revision. Most scholars today prefer the 1818 text. It's rawer, angrier, more ambiguous. Victor bears more responsibility. The creature is more sympathetic. The moral questions are sharper, because no religious framework softens them. But both versions are extraordinary. After Frankenstein, Mary's life continued to be marked by loss. She wrote more novels, more stories, edited her late mother's work, but tragedy kept finding her. And the greatest blow was still to come. Percy Shelley drowned in 1822. His sailing boat went down in a storm off the Italian coast. He was 29. Mary was 24. A widow with a small son, stranded in a foreign country. Her partner and collaborator gone in an afternoon storm. She kept writing. Novels, short stories, biographical essays, travel pieces. She edited Percy's complete poems for publication, making sure the world would remember his work. Mary became the custodian of a genius while being one herself, often unrecognized. For decades, Mary Shelley was remembered primarily as Percy's wife, the woman who kept his flame burning. Her own genius was secondary in the public mind. The author of Frankenstein deserved better. She knew it. History is only now catching up. Mary Shelley died in 1851, at 53. But by then, her creation had already escaped her, the way creatures do. Frankenstein had become a myth, a word, a warning. It belonged to the world now, and it was only getting started. The novel was controversial from the start. Some early reviewers called it immoral and blasphemous. Others recognized immediately that something remarkable had arrived. The Edinburgh magazine called it an extraordinary tale of considerable power. The divide between critics who saw it as dangerous and those who saw it as brilliant continues to this day. Frankenstein makes people uncomfortable. That's part of its design. A comfortable horror story is a failed one. Stage adaptations began almost immediately. In 1823, just 5 years after publication, the first theatrical version appeared in London. Mary herself attended, and she watched something troubling happen to her creation. Each adaptation stripped something away. The creature's eloquence vanished first, his philosophy gone, his ability to quote Milton and debate morality erased. What remained was a grunting, stumbling brute. The inner life was the first casualty. Then came the 1931 film, Boris Karloff in makeup that would replace Mary Shelley's description in the public imagination forever. The flat head, the neck bolts, the green-tinged skin, the lurching walk. None of it is in the novel, not a word. The flat head, the bolts, the green skin. These are movie inventions. Shelley described translucent yellowish skin, watery eyes, black lips, long dark hair. Her creature was grotesque but recognizably human. The film turned him into something alien, something easy to fear and hard to pity. The film creature can barely speak. A few grunts, maybe a word. Shelley's creature reads Milton in the original, debates philosophy on a glacier, and delivers speeches that would hold their own in any courtroom. The difference could not be larger. Cinema narrowed the story, a philosophical novel about creation, responsibility, and what it means to be human became a simple horror movie about a mad scientist and his monster. The questions disappeared. Only the scares remained. But here's the paradox. The films made Frankenstein universal. Everyone on Earth knows the name. People who've never read a novel in their lives know the bolt-necked monster. Cinema simplified the story, but spread it across the entire world. The most common mistake in all of literature. People call the creature Frankenstein. They mean the monster, not the doctor. It happens so often it's practically correct now. But the mistake actually tells us something important. Maybe the mistake is actually correct. The creature is Victor's legacy, his identity, the thing that defines him forever. In a way, the creature is Frankenstein. The creation consumed the creator's name. Even language recognizes what the novel argues. The creature has no name in the novel. Not one. Victor never named him. Think about what that means. You create a living, thinking being, and you don't even give it a word to call itself. That's not just neglect. That's erasure. Victor wouldn't give him even that, a name, a word to anchor an identity, the most basic gift a parent gives a child. This is who you are, withheld entirely. And so the creature remains nameless. 200 years of being called someone else's name. Or nothing at all. So what did Frankenstein become? Beyond the novel, beyond Mary Shelley's life, what did this story do to the world? The answer is, it changed how we think about creation itself, permanently. Before Shelley, horror came from the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, curses. Gothic novels were full of haunted castles and mysterious villains. But Frankenstein introduced something new. The horror came from science, from human ambition, from us. She invented a genre. The horror of human technological overreach. Every story about science going wrong. Every tale of creation escaping its creator's control. Every warning about playing God. It starts here. With A Teenager's Nightmare by a Swiss lake. Every mad scientist in fiction traces back to Victor Frankenstein. The brilliant loner working in secret, convinced they're improving the world, blind to the destruction they're causing. That archetype didn't exist before 1818. Mary Shelley built it from scratch. Jurassic Park is Frankenstein with dinosaurs. Scientists use cutting-edge technology to resurrect extinct creatures. They lose control immediately. The creations turn on their creators. Michael Crichton openly acknowledged the debt. Life, as his character said, finds a way, and it always escapes the lab. Artificial intelligence stories are Frankenstein's most direct descendants. The created being that becomes self-aware. That asks, why was I made? That demands rights or freedom or revenge. Every AI narrative carries Shelley's DNA in its code. Blade Runner, Ex Machina, Westworld. The pattern is always the same. A creator builds something extraordinary. The creation develops consciousness. The creation confronts its maker. The maker refuses to take responsibility. Shelley wrote the template. Everyone else is writing variations. The creature's central question resonates louder now than ever. In an age of artificial intelligence, of machine learning, of systems that surprise their own designers, what do we owe the things we create? Shelley asked it first. We still can't answer it. Genetic engineering, clean editing. Every time humanity modifies life at the molecular level, someone invokes Frankenstein. The name has become shorthand for the fear that we're tampering with forces we don't fully understand. And maybe shouldn't. Playing God. The phrase practically originated from this novel. Before Frankenstein, the idea that human ambition could rival divine creation was blasphemy. Not narrative. Shelley made it a story. And stories, once told, can never be untold. Nuclear technology carries the same Promethean weight. Scientists splitting the atom, unleashing a force they couldn't fully control. The parallel to Victor's spark is almost too perfect. Creation and destruction in the same gesture. Power and consequence inseparable. Frankenstein gave us a framework, a language. When we need to talk about the ethics of creation, about the responsibilities of innovators, about the gap between what we can do and what we should do, Shelley's novel provides the vocabulary. In philosophy, the novel engages directly with the problem of the other. How do we treat beings who are different from us? The creature is the ultimate other, human in mind, inhuman in body. His existence tests every assumption about who deserves moral consideration. In psychology, the creature's development mirrors attachment theory with uncanny precision. A being abandoned by its primary caretaker, denied physical comfort, denied recognition. The behavioral consequences unfold exactly as modern developmental science would predict. Neglected by a caretaker, the creature develops exactly as contemporary research predicts. First desperate attempts at connection, then withdrawal, then rage, then violence directed at the source of pain. Shelley understood developmental psychology a century before the field existed. In gender studies, the novel is a landmark, not just because of its content, but because of its creation. Mary Shelley's authorship was itself an act of defiance. A young woman claiming space in a literary world that assumed genius was male. Geneva, 1816. A villa full of famous men, Byron the most celebrated poet of the age, Percy Shelley, a rising star, and an 18-year-old girl who outright them all. The ghost story contest was won by the person no one expected. Some scholars read Frankenstein as a birth myth, the anxiety of creation, of bringing something into the world that you can't control, that might destroy you, that might suffer because of you. For a woman who had lost a child, this reading cuts deep. Mary had lost a baby before writing Frankenstein. She knew the terror of watching something you created struggle and fail. The novel's horror isn't just about a monster. It's about the fear every parent carries, that what you bring into the world will suffer because of you, or creating something that lives, that grows beyond you, that faces a world you can't protect it from. Victor's failure isn't that he created the creature. It's that he created the creature and then refused to shield it from a cruel world. Frankenstein is one of the most taught novels in English literature worldwide. University courses on romanticism, on Gothic fiction, on science fiction, on ethics, all return to this text. 200 years of scholarship, and the arguments are still unresolved. Students still argue about it in every seminar. Is the creature a villain or a victim? The debate has no resolution because Shelley designed it that way. He's both. He's a murderer who was made into one. The moral complexity is the point. There is no right answer. And that's exactly what makes it a great novel. Books that deliver clean morals are read once and set aside. Books that ask genuine questions. Questions the author herself couldn't resolve. Those are the ones that last centuries. Modern adaptations are finally returning to the source. Recent retellings remember that the creature could speak beautifully, that he read philosophy, that his inner life was rich and complex. The eloquent monster is making a comeback. The creature given voice again. After decades of grunting movie monsters, the literary creature is being heard once more. Writers are remembering that Shelley's most radical choice was giving the most beautiful language to the most frightening character. The story works in every era because the questions never expire. What is human? What do we owe the vulnerable? Who is the real monster? These aren't questions that belong to 1818. They belong to every year that followed, including this one. What does it mean to be human? The creature asked that question before anyone in literature. He had thoughts, feelings, language, empathy, a moral sense. He read books. He wept. He loved. And the world said, "You are not one of us. Your body disqualifies your soul. What do we owe the vulnerable?" Shelley asked it in 1818. The creature was vulnerable, newborn, alone, different. Society owed him care and gave him violence. That dynamic hasn't changed. We still punish people for being different. The novel still applies. There's an environmental reading of Frankenstein that grows more relevant every year. Humanity creates systems and technologies that transform the natural world. And when those systems escape our control, the consequences devastate everything, including us. Climate change is a Frankenstein story. We built an industrial system. It grew beyond our control. Now it's transforming the world in ways we never intended. And just like Victor, we're discovering that some creations can't be undone. The parallels are uncomfortable. They should be. The novel survives because it's not about one thing. It's about everything. That's the sign of real literature. You can read Frankenstein through the lens of science, or psychology, or gender, or ecology, or philosophy, and it holds up perfectly through each one. It's about science, loneliness, beauty, justice, revenge, and love, or the absence of it. All of these threads woven together into something that looks like a horror novel, but reads like a philosophical treatise, wrapped in a ghost story, wrapped in a warning. And it was written by a grieving teenager, which makes it even more extraordinary. At an age when most people are figuring out who they are, Mary Shelley wrote a novel that told the world who we all are. And she was right. Mary Shelley deserves to be remembered. Not as Percy's wife, not as Byron's acquaintance, not as someone's daughter or someone's widow, as a genius, as the inventor of science fiction, as the woman who saw the future before it arrived and tried to warn us. She saw the future. The fear that technology would outpace wisdom. The fear that created things would turn on their creators. The fear that beauty would be valued over substance and that the different would be destroyed. She saw all of it. In 1818. At 18. The warning is simple. Don't create what you won't care for. Don't bring something into existence and walk away. Whether it's a child, a technology, a policy, or an institution, if you make it, you own it. Its suffering becomes your responsibility. Don't reach for knowledge you're not prepared to live with. Victor discovered the secret of life and was destroyed by it. Not because the knowledge was evil, but because he wasn't strong enough or generous enough to bear what it demanded of him. And never assume that something different from you is something less than you. The creature's face was wrong. His body was wrong. But his mind was magnificent and his heart was deep. The world judged the surface and destroyed the soul beneath. Those lessons are over 200 years old, and they are more urgent now than they have ever been. We create more faster, with greater power and less consideration than any generation before us. Shelley's warning hasn't been heeded. It needs to be. That is the legacy of Frankenstein, and of the remarkable woman who wrote it. A novel that refuses to age, a warning that refuses to be silenced, and a question about what we owe our creations that refuses to be answered. Because it shouldn't be. Not yet. Now, as we start to wind down, let that story settle around you. All of it. The lightning, the glacier, the yellow eyes. Let it rest like a blanket on a cold night. Think about the creature for a moment. Standing on that ice raft facing north, the world behind him. Everything he wanted, love, a name, a place. Growing smaller with every wave, he chose to end his story on his own terms. All he wanted was someone to look at him and see more than his face. To hear his words instead of screaming at his appearance. That's not a monstrous wish. That's the most human one there is. And it was never granted. And Victor, brilliant, terrified, running from his own creation for years. He could have turned around at any point. Could have faced what he'd made. Could have said, I see you, I'm responsible for you. He never did. They were more alike than either could admit. Both brilliant, both alone, both burning with a need that the world couldn't satisfy. Creator and creation, locked together, destroying each other, all the way to the ice at the end of the earth. There's something in that story for all of us. The things we create and can't control. The things we avoid because they're too frightening to face. The people we fail because we're too wrapped up in our own fear to see theirs. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't the discovery. It's not the spark or the breakthrough or the grand ambition. Sometimes the bravest thing is staying, caring for what you've made, turning back when everyone else pushes forward. Walton understood that. Victor never did. The ice is quiet now. The ship has turned. The story is told. Walton's pen has stopped writing. Victor rests. The creature has gone where we can't follow. Everything that needed to happen has happened. The words can settle. Walton chose to go home, back to his sister Margaret, back to warmth and conversation and the small, ordinary miracles of daily life. Maybe that was the wisest choice in the whole book. The grandest ambition traded for the simplest love. Tonight you're home too. Or wherever you are, you're here, listening, resting. The story reached you wherever you are, and that's enough. You don't need to do anything with it. Just let it be. Let the alpine winds become white noise now. Distant soft. Just the sound of air moving over snow and stone and glacier. A sound that has nothing to do with you, nothing to ask of you. Just background. Just atmosphere. Let the candlelight in Victor's laboratory flicker and go dark. The equipment is still. The jars are dusty. The table is empty. The room is just a room now. Nothing living in it. Nothing to fear. Just an old attic settling into silence. Lake Geneva is still tonight. Moonlight on the water, no wind. The mountains reflected perfectly in the surface. The Frankenstein estate is dark, its windows shuttered. The garden sleeps beneath frost, everything at rest. Elizabeth's garden in silver light. The flowers closed for the night, waiting for a morning they're in no hurry to reach. The roses she tended, the paths she walked, all quiet under the moon, beautiful and undisturbed. The forest where the creature wandered is quiet now, just owls calling, leaves falling in the windless dark. The paths he walked have grown over. The lean to shed has collapsed into the earth, nature reclaiming its own. Even the Arctic has gone silent, just the soft creak of ice settling. The slow groan of glaciers inching forward in the dark. Old sounds, patient sounds. The earth doing what it does when no one is watching, which is everything. The story is over. But stories never really end. They just go quiet for a while. They rest in the pages, in the memory. In that place between waking and sleep, where words dissolve into images, and images dissolve into feeling. You can come back to Frankenstein anytime. It waits patiently. 200 years of patience so far. It's not going anywhere. The creature is still on the ice. Victor is still in the laboratory. The questions are still unanswered. They'll be here when you're ready. But for now, let it go. Let Victor rest. Let the creature rest. Let Mary Shelley rest. They've all earned it. And so have you. Whatever today asked of you, the asking is done. The night is yours. Your breathing is slowing. Or maybe it will soon. There's no schedule for it, no deadline. Your body knows what it needs, and it's already doing it. Whether you notice or not, trust it. It's been doing this for a long time. The words are getting softer now. The spaces between them wider, like footprints in snow, growing fainter and further apart, until the trail just gently ends, and there's nothing but white and quiet, and the soft sound of your own breathing. There's nothing you need to do right now. Nothing to decide. Nothing to fix. Nothing to create or care for or worry about. Just this moment. Just warmth and quiet, and the end of a good story told by a friend. Just this. Warmth, quiet, the memory of a story settling into your mind the way snow settles on a field, soft, even, covering everything gently. No edges, no urgency, just rest. If you're still awake, that's perfectly fine. You heard a great tale tonight. One of the best ever written. And you heard it the way it was meant to be heard. Quietly, in the dark, with nowhere else to be. If you're drifting, even better. Let it carry you. The way the ice carried the creature. The way the current carried Victor's boat. The way stories carry all of us, gently, from one place to another, without us having to steer. Tomorrow the world will ask things of you again. Decisions, effort, attention, care. But not yet. Not for hours. Right now there's a wide, soft space between you and tomorrow, and you can fill it with absolutely nothing. That's allowed. Right now. The only question is whether the pillow is comfortable enough. And I think it probably is. You've been still for a while now. Your body's found its position. The weight of the day has drained out through your feet and into the floor. You've been still for a while. That's good. Stillness is underrated. The whole world prizes movement, action, forward momentum. But rest is where everything repairs. Where the mind sorts what it's gathered. Where the body remembers how to be whole. The night is long and kind, and you've earned every quiet minute of it. Whatever you did today, whatever you carried, you brought yourself here. To rest. That's not nothing. That's everything. Thank you for spending this hour with me, and with Mary Shelley, and with her extraordinary, heartbreaking, brilliant story. It was good company for a night like this. I hope it served you well. Sleep well tonight. And if you dream, dream of mountains and starlight. Dream of Lake Geneva in summer. Dream of a young woman at a writing desk, about to change the world with a quill and a candle and a nightmare. Not of monsters. There are none here tonight. Nothing in the dark that means you harm. Just the gentle memory of a story, told the way stories should be told, slowly, warmly, between friends, in the comfortable dark. Just the gentle memory of a story, told by a friend, in the dark, with nothing asked in return except that you rest. That's all. That's the whole deal. Rest now, the story will keep. Good night. From Bedtime Books. We'll be here next week with another story. Another great book, told gently in the dark. Until then, sleep well. And thank you for listening.